We can criticize the movie Sinners while still recognizing that it is a powerful piece of Black art. The shade thrown by publications like the New York Times about its box office opening is frankly not considered reasonable critique. It's just a microaggression against a Black creator. However, the general consensus that anyone saying something negative about the movie Sinners is immediately a hater is unfair, and the reason why we continue to have such problems with the portrayal of Black characters in media. And of course, this is really more of an issue when it comes to the portrayal of Black women in media.
They still got a lot wrong with their representation in the movie, in my opinion. And this is where my critiques come in. Something I picked up on was that despite being a desirable love interest, Annie still played a mammy role. And I can tell by the way Black women are responding to this movie that a lot of y'all didn't pick up on that, or maybe you don't care. And becoming the sacrifice, I don't know what is. And in an interview I read that one we did with the Hollywood Reporter, she actually described Annie being Smoke's protector, his teacher, his lover, his friend, and his mother. So even when a plus-size, dark-skinned Black woman is portrayed as the lover to a Black man in the movie, she's still got to be his protector and his mama too.
I don't want to say I 100% disagree, but there is some caveats to what Chrissy is saying and how I feel about the way that Hollywood is struggling, for whatever reason, to depict Black women as comprehensive human beings. In the words of Lauryn Hill, it could all be so simple, but Hollywood would rather make it hard. I really don't know why. So let's just jump into it. Let's talk about what this recent attempt at depicting Black women on screen tells us about the ways that society still views Black women. But then also let's do a retrospective of how Black executives who are sometimes funding these projects have had a hand in making this depiction of Black women on screen more complicated than it has to be. Keep this quote in mind while we analyze the movie. It's from a Black female psychologist named Jennifer L. Eberhardt, who says, "Bias, even when we are not conscious of it, has consequences that we need to understand and mitigate. The stereotypic associations we carry in our heads can affect what we perceive, how we think, and the actions that we take." Ultimately, this is the reason why people like Chrissy harp on every little detail regarding the roles that Black women get cast in on TV and film. What feels like nitpicking is actually an effort to reduce the potentially harmful actions that people take towards Black women in real life based on what they continuously see in the media. Based on human psychology and based on this quote, we react to one another not just based on our real life experiences, but fictional experiences as well. There's no way to be 100% objective about how every viewer is going to experience Annie, Pearline, or Mary from the movie Sinners. All we can do is attempt to analyze their dialogue and their interactions with one another to uncover patterns that we've seen from other films and other TV shows with similar plots and characters. Which brings me to this point. Lately, whenever I see a strong Black woman type character, whether it be in a TV show or in a movie, I almost immediately compare them to Angela Abar from the HBO series Watchmen. That's because I see her as the closest attempt that Hollywood has made thus far to show a Black woman being protected versus being the protector. If you've seen the series, you know that it still has Angela's story riddled with a lot of the tropes ascribed to Black women as fighters. And on that point, let's really clarify and be very specific about what the strong Black woman trope is, or what it consists of. According to the Journal of Black Studies, it describes the strong Black woman trope as A, Black women having no choice but to be fearless, ambitious, and hardworking. B, masking the unfair burden that is often placed on Black women. And C, showing Black women's strength as a necessary response to a racist society in which survival requires strength, or showing their resiliency as an ability to perform under extreme pressure. Objectively, we see that both in the plots of Sinners and HBO Watchmen. Both of the main Black female protagonists, Annie and Angela, are put in situations where they have to use force or their stoic reasoning to save themselves and others from physical or psychological harm at the hands of racist people or a racist society. A fundamental difference, though, between both the movie Sinners and the TV show HBO Watchmen is whether or not anyone comes to their aid, and also whether or not they not only survive, but thrive at the end of each of their battles. I appreciate Chrissy's video for pointing out that Annie from Sinners accepts the fact that she will to only find peace and safety in the afterlife rather than here in the physical world. And it likely feels very unfair and unjust that Mary, the 1/8 black white woman who sets off the events that eventually kills Annie, gets to live eternally without suffering any consequences for her actions. When Mary attempts to use her proximity to whiteness to save her so-called family from the threat of white supremacy and failed, Annie is the one that picks up the slack and immediately goes into savior mode, trying to make sure that the vampires are kept at bay for as long as possible. Her lover, a black man named Smoke, could not save her from this fate, unfortunately. But somehow, though he couldn't save her, he thought it necessary or at minimum okay to allow Mary, the person responsible for the death of his lover, to go on living eternally with her lover, who is also his twin brother, Stack. He could have killed Mary, but instead decided to allow her to go on living as long as she and her lover, aka his brother, Stack, promised not to harm anybody anymore. Think about that. The total opposite happens in HBO's Watchmen. Yes, Angela has been protecting her husband, the practically immortal Dr. Manhattan, from being discovered by the racist groups and entities that are trying to siphon his superpowers. And yes, she has technically been protecting her city as an undercover cop from neo-fascist and Klans groups that are threatening to start a race war in Tulsa. But in the last episode, when it was down to the wire and it seemed like Angela's enemies were going to win, her husband, in the body of a black man, that's important, literally jumps in front of the bullets to save her. And not only does he make sure that she survives, he makes sure that she thrives by leaving behind, when he's gone, a part of his power for her to inherit. So in other words, he makes sure that she can become immortal and protect herself, even when he's not there to protect her. It's important to point out that this is a heavy adaptation from the original source material, the comic book Watchmen, which means that the writers of the HBO series went above and beyond, out of their way, to subvert the tropes and the expected ending or outcome for a character like Angela. So much so that the writer of the original text, the original comic book, went on a high-key racist rant for over a year about it. This is the only reason why I empathize with critiques from people like Chrissy's. And I don't want to downplay how necessary it is to speak about both the good and the bad in art that's produced by Black creators, especially when it features Black women at the center. It's so important that an original screenplay written by a Black film director is beating box office expectations and is proving that movies with a predominantly Black cast can not only be profitable in US domestic markets, but markets globally. At the same time, it is extremely important to point out when these films still fall short of providing an unbiased, pro-womanist depiction of Black women, because the world is literally watching right now, and therefore learning how to interact with Black women based on these projects. The Leading Like a Lady podcast was created to remind Black women, young and old, that acting like a lady is exactly what the world needs in leadership.